Okay, Winston, it's time for the walk and talk. Are you coming? Are you coming?
All right, well, Winston didn't fancy the hike up the mountain today, so we'll get started. Okay, ladies and gents, we've got some wild stuff to talk about today. It is really ramping up. And I try and keep the walk and talks sort of very succinct and give you a summary of all the things that have been going on this week, most of the important stuff. But I want to focus today on two main topics. One is the war escalation and a load of stuff that's come out this week that didn't really make headline news, so you might not be aware of it. And then we'll just touch upon what's going on in the US and Trump and Biden and all the other stuff, because that's a crazy situation as well. But let's kick off with all the NATO stuff, which I think is really important. So the first two major stories that I've been following this week, firstly is the German lawmakers calling for the activation of almost 1 million reservists. These are military reservists, and they're saying because of what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. So that's the first major thing. The second one is what NATO has just mapped out. Here it is. NATO maps out plans for European ground war. This is their words. The story says NATO is developing multiple land corridors to transport US troops and armour quickly to the front lines in the event of a major European ground war with Russia. Yes, this is what they are talking about. And now you understand that giant NATO exercise that we were talking about a lot. They said this was just a general, military drill, even though it was on Russia's doorstep, etc. So it's obvious they never want to tell us what's actually going on. They only want to tell us the things like conscription, get yourselves ready. But they never want to tell us the other details of what's actually going on. So they've got a full plan here. They said American soldiers would arrive at one of 5 designated ports and follow pre-planned logistical routes, ensuring rapid deployment to counter potential Moscow attacks. And NATO leaders said that everyone must prepare for a possible conflict with Russia, and they plan to keep 300,000 troops at high readiness. 300,000 troops, that's interesting when we look at all of these exercises that were taking place. And I want to put this map on screen here so that you can see this map that the NATO has published, and it's called How US Troops Could Be Sent to the Front Line in European Ground War with Russia. That's actually what it says. So it shows NATO members in green and the Russian in pink here, and Ukraine is in blue. So it shows point number 1 there, Netherlands to Germany to Poland. This would be one of the routes for US troops. It's strange they're focusing very heavily on US troops. I guess they would be the sort of spearhead, the main bulk of the military there. Number 2 shows Italy to Slovenia through Croatia and Hungary. Route 3, Greece to Bulgaria to Romania. Route 4 is Turkey to Bulgaria to Romania. And then the final one is through the Nordic states. So that is Norway to Sweden into Finland. So, I mean, drop a comment below. What do you think? Because to me, this says that this is going to happen. It's just a matter of time, especially when we're seeing all of these breakdowns at the moment. We're seeing geopolitical tensions rising even further. They're not getting better. They're getting worse, and they're getting worse everywhere, all at the same time. And now we're seeing people or certain leaders starting to take advantage of all of this and escalating these conflicts even further. The Ukrainian Air Force wanted 4 squadrons of F-16s. It's finally getting them. And then it goes into detail. So it says they're going to receive 85 F-16 fighters from Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Belgium. The F-16s armed with AIM-120 air-to-air missiles aim to counter Russia's glide bombing campaign by targeting bombers up to 100 miles away. Now, the US has also made an announcement. So 2 days later, after this one came out, and they are announcing their participation as well in training Ukrainian pilots. And the Department of Defense says that it's already taking place at the Morris Air Base, and a small number of Ukrainian pilots began training with the 162nd Wing around the 25th of October. And the first F-16 pilot trainer has already arrived in the country. He is a Greek national, and he is now training the Ukrainians on the F-16s. And this was all announced, if you remember, back in July 2023 under the 11-nation under NATO coalition plan. So this is going ahead now, it's ramping up. And they're going to have 4 squadrons very soon. And it's going to be Denmark and the Netherlands that are going to be leading the F-16 squadron training and deployment. In other news then, Macron has just held a meeting where he's gathered a lot of European leaders to discuss again, he's like a dog with a bone on this one, to discuss again having them send troops to Ukraine. And this is where it gets a little bit wild. Oh, actually before that, he is expected to unveil his newest plan during a meeting with Zelensky and other leaders, including Joe Biden, in Normandy on the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Estonia and Lithuania are behind the plan and also want to send troops, but Germany is against the plan. They don't want to send any ground troops. And Putin has responded to a lot of this. He's actually made a statement, and he talked about this on a recent interview. And it was said that he laughed at the request not to injure, maim, or kill any NATO troops in Ukraine. That is a weird one if you think about it. It's a war, it's a conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and NATO wants to send troops, so European troops, and they've put in a request that Russia doesn't kill or injure any of their troops that are going to be embedded in with the Ukrainian troops. I mean, that's impossible. That is not going to happen. You know what it's like in warfare. It doesn't matter what you request like that, it's not going to happen. And I even remember back in, I think it was Iraq, and we're really going back now, I don't know, 20 years I would have thought. And I remember there was a friendly fire incident where I think it was Americans who actually fired on Americans, or it was a fighter jet bombed some US troops or something like that. I can't remember the exact details. And that was friendly on friendly. So I just can't see this request actually happening. But either way, the Kremlin or Putin made a response to it, and they also added on, no instructor involved in training the Ukrainian military has immunity. It doesn't matter whether they're French or not. So I think they've made their position quite clear based on the request, and this will only ramp things up even further, I think. But let's move over now to what's actually happened in the US with Trump and Biden, or let's just say Trump first of all, we'll focus on this, with his felony conviction. You can see who's been behind a lot of this just by reading the media sources and seeing what the media has to say about it. So a lot of the media are rejoicing. They couldn't be happier about this conviction, and they're jumping all over it already, and calling him a convicted felon now, a criminal. And the BBC have jumped on this, saying that he shouldn't be allowed to travel, and there's this big list of 40 countries, including Canada and the UK, that should immediately put blocks on him traveling there. In fact, they put out a massive list. There was a full list that came out from Argentina, Australia, Canada, China, India, Ireland, Israel, Japan, Mexico, New Zealand, Taiwan, Ukraine, the United Kingdom. They're saying that these countries will not allow him into the country. Whether or not that actually happens, I would highly doubt it. There's 40 countries that they've listed here. I don't think this is going to happen at all. I think he's still going to be allowed into these countries. And I didn't follow the whole case in detail, but I did look at, a bit of the evidence and a summary of some of the stuff. And the whole thing is just a massive, it's so weird, let me just say that. If that was anyone else, and if you remember the Clinton campaign, well, you know what happened there. That was millions. It wasn't such a small amount that they're talking about with Trump. It was millions and millions. And she basically got a slap on the wrist and the whole thing disappeared. Whereas for him, you can see, and again, it doesn't matter whether you like him or not, this will lead to massive, massive issues in the US. Because I just don't think that a lot of people in the US are going to stand for this. I really don't. The maximum sentence on something like this is 4 years, but it's usually just very light sentence, or they treat it as a lesser crime, as it were. But some of the Democrats, I was reading the comments on what they want to do. They want to put him into prison. Some of them are saying he should go into general population. They're saying that his Secret Service protection should be removed. All this stuff, it's crazy. That is crazy talk. Oh yeah, put him into general population in a prison with no Secret Service or any, I mean, it's obvious what that would result in. And I just, honestly, even though the BBC and a lot of these, CNN I saw as well, saying that, he's going to go to prison, he's like, he might go to prison and all this sort of stuff. There's absolutely no way. You talk about civil war. Yeah, what do you think would happen if that actually happened? I reckon a massive, you would see fighting in the streets if something like that happened. And Biden's comments were really unusual. You don't usually see him getting fired up. But he got really fired up, really angry. Wanted to read out what he said. He called Trump a convicted felon, and he should not be allowed to run for the office of the president, and that it sets a dangerous precedent for the future. That's what he said. I would say that is a very dangerous thing for him to be saying. And then the BBC doubled down on their articles, started pumping all this stuff out. Can he even run for president now he's a convicted felon? Well, I looked into it and the answer is yes. So here's the US Constitution requirements for presidential candidates. They must be at least 35 years old, be a natural born US citizen, and have lived in the US for at least 14 years. There are no rules blocking candidates with criminal convictions. And they actually put in a proper request to the Secret Service to say, will you still protect Trump if he's sent to prison? And they said absolutely yes. They don't know the logistics of it yet or how they would do it. But if he was sent to prison, then they would still protect him in prison. So I don't know, maybe he'd have his own, I mean, it's not going to happen anyway, of course, but maybe under that he'd have his own cell and one of the Secret Service would be in the cell or something with it. The whole thing is just nonsense. It really is. And they've even set the sentence in for 4 days before the Republican conference begins as well. This whole thing is just political. They're trying to stop the inevitable. But you look at the surveys, it's actually boosted Trump's popularity. And those independent people, or those that are on the fence, have actually been swung. This is what the surveys say. Again, these aren't right-wing surveys. These are very neutral surveys. And by the way, this isn't even over yet. Do you know that there's still 3 more criminal prosecution trials due against him? Did you realize this? So even when they've said even if he becomes president in November, they're still going to continue this on all the way through his presidency. I just think this is wild. It's so crazy what is going on in the US. So there's a poll that's just come out then as well. It's conducted by Heart Research. And it was also the public opinion strategies in accordance with NBC News. This poll, anyway, revealed that 73% of voters believe the US is getting out of control. In fact, is now out of control and on the wrong track under the Biden administration. This is the highest ever recorded in US history. So I would love to know what you think about all of this, because I think the whole thing is just crazy, everything that's going on. I think the politics in the US are getting out of control as well with the left and the right divide. I'm actually seeing something quite interesting developing in the UK actually, whereas before it was left and right in terms of, well, it's not even, I wouldn't even describe it as left and right. You got Labour and you got Conservative. But now what's emerging quite quickly is the Reform Party. So it's not a new party, but it's definitely up and coming, as it were. So Nigel Farage, who many of you will either love or hate, Nigel Farage is actually standing as the leader of Reform. So this is also really interesting because already the polls are shifting and a lot more people are saying that they're going to vote Reform rather than Labour or Conservative. So this will be really interesting. You can't get any worse anyway than what's happening with the Conservatives and Labour. They're all part of the big gang, aren't they? But as always, I think that the whole world, as I've said, is changing, and it's changing fast. And we've all just got to be prepared as best we can now with all of these things that are happening at such a rapid rate. And as promised, your new course is being done at the moment. It is exhausting. I am honestly working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, trying to get this course finished for you, but it's not going to be finished for a while yet. There's so much happening and there's so much changing so rapidly that I don't want it to be like all these other courses where they're out of date within a couple of months, some of these courses these days. I want this course to be future-proof. I'm building it now based on the next 5 to 10 years, so that no matter what happens in the world and with the geopolitical tensions and everything, that you're going to have an extra stream or multiple streams of income coming in that are separate to your job. So this is really what the course is all about, that I'm building at the moment for you. Oh, let's go down here, let's go off-road a bit here. And I'm going to do that on a pre-release anyway, so I'll release it as soon as I can once I've got the first couple of modules recorded, and then I'll try and release a module every week or so, or every couple of weeks. And obviously, because of that reason, that it won't be released all at once, I'll do a really heavy discount on the course so that you can get it early. Okay, well, I think that's about it for now then. I'm going to continue my walk today, get home, get this edited. So thanks for being online. Thanks for being a subscriber here. Take care. God bless you. God bless your family. And I'll speak to you very soon.